Fight Night Picks is brought to you by Vertiball. Head on over to their website. It's vertiball.com. And listen, it's an awesome product. It's a local company out of New Brunswick, Canada. So make sure you support those guys locally as well as Fight Night Picks. But they're the only mountable portable muscle massager. They can stick onto any smooth surface. They've got an industrial strength suction cup. Can support over 100 pounds of pressure. You can get really into those deep knots. I have one here at home. I use it for my back and my shoulders from holding up that Fight Night Picks Pick'em trophy. But listen, make sure you check them out. It's a great product. Like I said, they're recommended by physiotherapists, masseuses, and chiropractors across Canada, the US, UK, and Australia. And they're used by countless professional athletes like Minka Fitzpatrick on screen there, as well as Clellan Farrell of the Raiders. So if you head into the cart, make sure you check them out. So I've got a Vertiball massager in my cart right there. Use the promo code FNP. You're going to save 10% off your order. You're supporting this company here that I'm very passionate about in New Brunswick, Canada, and you're helping out us as well. So make sure you check them out, vertiball.com, promo code FNP, 10% off your order. And without further ado, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. It's time for Fight Night Picks with your host, Craig and Matt Allen.
Oh boy, and just like that, we are back and getting ready for UFC Vegas 27. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, we have Matt Allen at Matt Allen FNP. And Matt, we look like creepy pale vampires. That's just the way it is today because we haven't had sun. I mean, listen, it's 8 months in the winter for us. It really is. But I'm really looking forward to this card. Now, I have to say this. I threw it out there in the chat. That chat is going to go absolutely wild. So if you want to get noticed, be sure to hit up that super chat and help the boys out. A like would certainly be appreciated as well. But I threw it up there in the chat. Damir Hadzovic, and there's two Damirs. They were supposed to be back-to-back. Damir Hadzovic and Yancy Medeiros is off the card today. So unfortunate. That would have been an absolute banger. Pop and popcorn for the boys. But I was looking forward to that. Oh, Jace is hanging out in the chat. Phoenix is there. Lucas23, Matt the Mick, and Laos Non. Matt, I really like this card. There's a lot of sneaky fights.
It is a really fun card. You've got former champions, former title challengers. It's one of those sneaky loaded cards where, yes, it might not have the star power at the top, but there's a lot of really underrated fights the whole way through this card that I'm really excited about. And I know a lot of people are upset that Anthony Joshua isn't fighting Tyson Fury at the end of the year. We've got a pretty interesting boxing matchup in tonight's main event. So again, I'm really excited for this UFC in Vegas show.
Can't wait to see it. Trev hanging out there over in the chat, as well as Real News MMA. And Chris is saying Spencer versus Rothwell parlay. I grabbed Rothwell at the start of the week, if I'm being honest. I got him at minus 250, and he's continued to trend as more and more of a favorite. We've got Jack over in the super chat. Once you get the Lawnmower 3.0, what's planned for the old 3 or the 4.0? What are we doing with the 3.0? It probably goes in the drawer. I'll be honest. That's probably where it goes. I was pretty nice. We got a few of the weed whackers. I handed them out, but great products there from Manscaped. I will, of course, talk about them later. Let's talk about them now, Matt. We'll flip it on over to our Fight of the Night screen. As always, presented by Manscaped. And Matt, the picture here, we've got a new fight. This was just announced yesterday. 24 hours notice for Juan Camilo Medeiros. And Matt, I absolutely love the fight. If you've seen Juan Camilo in his WXC career and his amateur career, the guy can certainly bang. David Dvorak's one of those guys as well. And we'll talk about this fight in great detail as it is so short notice. But I consider this as a possible fight of the night. Training partners in the past, and these guys both bring it.
Should be a really interesting fight. It does suck for Juan Carlo in this fight because having a UFC debut against a guy like David Dvorak, it's not like the UFC is doing you any favors by putting you in there with a guy like Dvorak. But you know, this isn't going to be his last outing. Even if he loses to Dvorak, hopefully they do give him another fight afterwards. But this will be a really interesting one because for Dvorak, you're supposed to fight another ranked guy. Now you're coming in fighting a guy who's only 4-0 on like a day's notice. You don't really know where the mentality of David Dvorak is because you're so hyped up for that pie of a fight. We had it as a fight of the night because stylistically that fight would have been insane. And now you just have to wonder, is his motivation still going to be in the same place? Because like you had said, has a relationship with his new opponent. Just a lot of interesting storylines in this fight all of a sudden.
Over in the comments section, we got Robert Senechal saying, please let's do better than last week. Robert, not clairvoyance. It's a tough job to do, but I really do like this fight. So Matt, we'll flip it on over to our other pick. Rafael, Cody Garbrandt in that main event. A lot of people are wondering, what are you going with as far as an over-under? Are we going 1.5 rounds, 2.5 rounds? Most likely going to be a finish in this fight. And if it's not, holy smokes, can you imagine? I absolutely love it. What are you thinking?
We have 25 minutes for Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt to knock each other out. It's probably going to happen because for Rob Font, we've seen him get cracked before. Now, yes, I would say he is a durable fighter. It's not like he doesn't have a chin, but we have seen him get hurt on the feet in the past. And for Cody Garbrandt, he's really the definition of one of those fighters who's either going to win or lose by knockout, and that's why Cody Garbrandt fights are so exciting. And for this main event, again, I kind of talked about it with the boxing. This should be a really interesting fight. I doubt very many kicks are going to be thrown because not like Garbrandt or Font throw very many, but for Garbrandt, this is it, right? Like, you had your skid, you had that great win over a Sun Sound, now you're back in a main event slot. It'll be really interesting to see how good Garbrandt looks and his return to a 5-round atmosphere.
I absolutely love it. Can't wait for that fight, Matt. We have a great one coming up. I had the opportunity to hop on the Ultimate Weigh-In show last night with banging my knee into the desk with MMA Lock of the Night, Dave Millhouse, and Brian from MMA Takes Podcast. Make sure you check that one out. We had a lot of fun. As far as switching picks, I was pretty well on board with where I was at the start of the week, but I do have one that I'm a little iffy on this card, and there's a few fights that I've started to call them garbage fights because really odds are close, it's really tight, and win or lose, something crazy is going to happen, Tafa Vandera being one of them. But Matt, if this is somebody's first time checking out Question Mark Kicks, what we always do, we go from bottom to top. We'll recap it again at the end of the show. I want to hear from you over in the chat. Who are you going with? What are you thinking about this overall card? We have some great fights. And Matt, like I said, it's unfortunate we don't have Yancy Medeiros and Damir Hadzovic anymore. But the card does start off with the Damir, Matt. We have Rafael Alves taking on Damir Ismagulov. And Matt, Damir Ismagulov has been one heck of a fun fighter to watch in his UFC tenure. It's been short. You look at the first fight, Alex Gorgis. Well, what's Alex doing these days? I don't know, he's still a young guy. We haven't seen him in a while. But you look at the scorecards for Ismagulov's 3 UFC fights. All 9 rounds. 5:30-27s, 3:30-26s, 1:30-25. The guy has absolutely blown the doors off his competition. Long time off. He beat Thiago Moises his last time out. It's been about a year and 8 months. And this is kind of one of those tune-up fights, but it's a weird one because for Alves, missed weight in his last time out. MMA Fighting had that really controversial headline and that I think they kind of whiffed at, and then they redid it. Wasn't Guilherme Cruz's fault. Good guy. But you saw the reasoning as to why he missed the weight the last time. Now, I was critical on him at first. I understand that. Like, there's not a whole lot you can do there. The guy has a family and a life outside of fighting. But this time, makes weight at lightweight. Looks pretty good on the scales. I can't wait for this one.
This should be an interesting fight, because this really is kind of a boxing fight in MMA. Because for Ismagulov, you're a guy who you've been out for a little bit, but we know how good you are. You don't accidentally become 22-1 in your MMA career. It doesn't just happen. You have to have the foundations of really all the skills. And for Alves, this will be a weird fight, because I do think he has a chance to win this fight in the first 4 or 5 minutes. Really, only the first round. Because for Alves, he's the definition of one of those fighters where he's either going to finish you in that first round, or he's going to be so tired in the second and third round that you're just really going to be able to overpower him and overwhelm him with your volume. So at the end of the day, I really like Damir in this fight.
Laos Nan saying Rafael is do or die. Never lost the decision. Phoenix, Damir by decision sounds like a solid choice. I have Damir Ismagulov in this fight. He is a big favorite, though, so maybe, again, like you said, maybe you do like Alves and you want to kind of hedge it a little bit in terms of the first round. Let's see what it is. This makes for good viewing and listening. Where are we here? Alves it wins in round 1, plus 1,100, plus 1,200, so maybe you do like that one and you want to hedge it. That's cool, but yeah, I've got Ismagulov in this one. If you have a look at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram, we're going to be talking about the votes the entire show, but 80% of fans have Ismagulov, 20% with Alves, and again, yeah, both of us going with Damir in this one.
If Damir, if he wins the first round, then the second and third round is going to be much more of the same. He is one of those fighters where once he does start to get momentum and he can kind of incorporate his wrestling in with his striking, I just think it's going to be a really hard night for Alves at the end of the day.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Both of us going with Kazakhstan's Damir Ismagulov. Matt, our next fight off the card, so we're not going to talk about it. This is just, again, a bit of a reminder. We don't have Medeiros taking on Hadzovic. That one was first reported by Damon Martin with MMA Fighting. So then we move on to our next one. David Dvorak taking on One Camilo Medeiros. And Matt, if we have a look at this one, I did all the tape study yesterday because, like I said, I was on MMA Lock of the Night, the recap show in terms of the weigh-ins. And if you look at Medeiros, really interesting fighter. 4 fights in 2019, won the WXC flyweight title, had a win over Eric Shelton. Before that, had a big win over Matt Elliott where he finished him. Elliott got hurt, unfortunately, in that fight. Undefeated amateur record. This guy's record, just if you look at it, it's kind of a little bit like Sean Brady, like undefeated, finishing guys. I don't know if he beat Eric Shelton, going back and watching the fight. Like, Shelton kind of dominated him a little bit. If you did like Medeiros, maybe you like the fact that he pressured him up against the cage. He did wrestle with Eric Shelton, and he had some success, but he was a little bit happy on the feet. He always resets every time he throws a combination. He resets, takes his time, leaves a lot of weight on his front foot. The other thing, if he pressures you up against the cage and doesn't get the takedown, he'll kind of zap off and also reset, so he's really hittable that way. I have a hard time. I mean, I really do like Medeiros for everything that his game entails. It's just really early, and he hasn't fought since 2019.
No, I couldn't agree more. And for Dvorak, he kind of is that total package. The only thing that sucks with Dvorak is we haven't seen him fight that upper level of competition just yet in the UFC. And it does suck that this is the matchup that unfortunately he is going to have to get tonight. But for Dvorak, I don't think he'll get a finish just because he doesn't win a lot of his fights by finishes, but, like, this should be a good showcase fight for Dvorak. I don't think this is a fight where the other guy gets cut at the end of it, but
yeah.
I do think Dvorak will be able to put on an impressive enough performance to really justify himself fighting a ranked fighter next.
So the funny thing with this fight, for David Dvorak, we talked about it in the Paiva prediction, the fact that you look at Dvorak, and it was a cheap comparison, the Czech comparison with Yuri Prochazka, but both of these guys coming into the UFC, absolutely complete martial artists, tons and tons of experience on the regional scene, and you know that they're going to make an impact on the big show. For Medeiros, maybe not so much, but the weird thing is these guys trained together about 35 weeks ago. You can see it over on Medeiros' Instagram page. Him locking shoulders with Dvorak and training at Extreme Couture. And for Medeiros, he's an Extreme Couture and 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu type of guy. He was getting Dvorak ready for that fight against Jordan Espinoza, where Dvorak looked great. So yeah, I do love the fight. This Wildlife saying, imagine an upset for Medeiros, but probably not. I mean, hey, stranger things have happened. Look at Bellator last night. Hannah Guy with the big win. Brett John's losing.
That's
like
true.
That was
Wild.
Danny Sabatello looked great, but yeah, for me, I have a look at this one. I mean, David Dvorak, the Fight Night Picks fans are definitely backing him. He's got 88% of the fan vote over there. I've got Dvorak. Listen, if Medeiros gets a win, man, credit where it's due. Shove it up everybody's hoop. But yeah, I've got Dvorak here.
Yeah, I think Dvorak's going to have this. For Medeiros, again, he's going to have a UFC career after this fight, I'm sure. And again, this isn't the worst fight they could put him in there with, but fighting David Dvorak on days' notice is not an easy task to accomplish. So again, if he can win, that's probably going to be the craziest moment of the night, I would say. But no, I agree. I've got Dvorak.
Could be tough going from Paiva to a long, like a short but long southpaw fighter. We'll see what happens in this one. Absolutely love it, Matt. Our next fight, we have Josh Culibao taking on Shayilan. And this was an interesting one. You know, I did so much tape study getting ready for our Chinese prospect here in Shayilan, representing the PI in Shanghai. He's got the Dean Amazinger connection. We had the 3 PI fighters at UFC 261. None of them successful. Rong Zhu just looked like he couldn't get it going. Archie Long really did get it going until he kind of hit a wall. And Na Liang had a fun fight against Ariane Carnelossi. And prayers up to Carnelossi. It seems like she was still in hospital, even recently recovering from that fight. But Matt, I absolutely love this one. I mean, for Shayilan, he's the type of guy that, unless he's getting totally outstruck, he doesn't normally back away. He brings in a really intense wrestling game, likes to get you up against the fence, take you down, get into the guard, stack it, and then start hammering away. I like this fight, and for Culibao, it's weird, right? Because he comes into the UFC against not Jalil Willis, he fought last night. He fought a really tough out, though, in the Tarantula. And then you look at it. He fights a guy in Charles Jourdain that he's a big underdog. He's like a plus 255 in that fight.
Insane fight.
Ends up drawing. I had Culibao 29-28 in that fight. Round 1, round 2. Round 3 was totally Jourdain's. Depends on how you score the second one, really. It was close. But the point is, he goes from being a big underdog a couple of times to being a big favorite against Shayilan. So what are you thinking?
I would rather a guy lose to Jalen Turner and have a close fight with Charles Jourdain than get knocked out by Rong Zhu. It's just me being honest, because here's the thing with Jourdain. Yes, I would say he's not as good of a fighter as his skills should be. Like, he's one of those guys who kind of realizes, like, I'm one of those action fighters. And with Jourdain, it doesn't matter who you put him in there with. It's going to be a fun fight. But the fighter that Joshua Culibao showed in that was really impressive. Like, he not only took Jourdain's best shots, but he also dropped Jourdain on the feet and had a lot of success in his own right. And having performances like that, I know we talked about this a lot, where it's you can lose a fight and gain a lot of stock. That was one of those draws where you gain a lot of stock, because I had Jourdain winning, but you bring up Culibao. Like, it was a really close fight where both guys got theirs. It's not just like it was one-sided and then one-sided. Like, it was just a really competitive fight between two very skilled fighters. So I do think Culibao is going to get this win, but for Shayilan, like, this is your opportunity. If you can go out there, like you said, get him up against the cage, start to get some of that ground and pound off, really tire Culibao by that third round, because the thing with Culibao is he's got one of those weird output rates where it's like, I can throw 70 punches a minute, and I will throw 70 punches a minute, but that is going to start to take its toll as the fight goes on. So as long as Culibao can defend takedowns, strike in the open space, don't try to waste your energy just defending the takedowns. Try to get your back off the cage. I think Culibao can have a recipe for a win. And it's weird too, because Culibao's not really the fighter you would think is going for his first UFC win. Like, this is a guy who I'm like, okay, he's been around for a while, but he really does have his opportunity to finally imprint himself with UFC fans, and I do think Culibao will get the win.
It is a tricky fight. To me, you look at Culibao coming in here, and again, it was the unknown in the first two fights. You like what you saw out of him the last time out. If we go over to the comments section, Alex is asking, well, first he says his channel is the best thing in MMA. Hit up the super chat, and we do appreciate that. I don't know how long Matt's flow is going to go. And to answer Anand's question, Anand, since day one, I mean, we're brothers, so that's how long we've known each other. And
we're not like Bruce and Michael Buffer, where it's like we found out about each other years later.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. Irregardless, saying Shayilan needs a quick finish, or he's done late. To me, I do have Culibao. I have him on the question mark kicks parlay. Ooh. When I put it together, and I was on Lock of the Night show last night, I wrote these ones down. I threw them out there, but Culibao was minus 260. He's the first leg of that parlay. I really do like it, though. It should be a good one. And it'll be a learning experience, right? Even 100%. If Culibao loses, then we get to see a little bit more tape out of Shayilan, and you can definitely find it out there. If you just kind of type the characters into Google, you're going to go down a weird road, but you'll see some really neat fights. So, Matt, let's flip it on over to our next fight. We've got Bruno Silva taking on Victor Rodriguez. Both of us have been incredibly critical of Victor Rodriguez, but hey, credit where it's due. The guy made the weight limit, what was it, 125.5. So you like that. I did a deep dive on his pro career. Don't think he's ever fought at flyweight before. He fought at featherweight a few times. He fought at bantamweight a few times. He also did wear, sweatpants, Dunlops, and his purple belt to one of his fights. He also fought outdoors in Alaska one time. Like, just a weird bucket of muscles coming into this one. For Bruno Silva, if you squint, you look a little, you take your glasses off, you wear glasses. He kind of looks like Patricio Pitbull when he fights. He's trained with the Pitbull brothers in the past. He's out of fight ready now. Santino DeFranco has been doing wonders with fighters recently. So I really do like this fight. But man, this is a tough one for Victor Rodriguez.
Okay, Bruno Silva fights like Patricio. If Patricio didn't have the... Oh, okay, sorry. But even Patricio, if Patricio didn't have the knockout power and just accepted the damage. Because for Bruno Silva, there's a bunch of question marks. And I should say, there's just a lot of question marks about both guys going into this fight. And I do think we're going to learn a lot. Because for Bruno Silva, I know you're better than JP buys. I just don't really know where JP fits into the whole UFC roster, because that wasn't a great performance whatsoever. And I don't want to take all the credit away from Bruno Silva, because I definitely think we saw an improved fighter in that performance. I just don't know how much stock I can take away from that one performance, because it was against Baze. And in the limited sample size that I've seen of his, I would say, MMA competition against higher levels of competition, he does tend to struggle. So for Bruno Silva, I actually think stylistically, this fight does play into what he can go out there and do. For Victor Rodriguez, I'm not saying he can't catch Bruno Silva, and I'm not saying that Bruno Silva won't get absurdly tired by the third round, because it wouldn't be a Bruno Silva fight if someone wasn't huffing and puffing, but I feel like he shed a lot of those things that I used to hold against him. I do think the cardio is getting better for Silva. I like his wrestling. I like his ground and pound. I know I'm just kind of rehashing what I said in our prediction video, but I just can't stress enough how much I think Bruno Silva's improved since his last fight. I think this is a guy who we're going to see make another step in this performance as well.
Yeah, irregardless, YT saying we taken over Cejudo, but yeah, I look at this fight and Bruno Silva. Listen, the Taha fight didn't go all that well. Then he fought Dvorak. All right, some of the leg kicks. Dvorak's a guy that's kind of like a wet blanket, and you can kind of stifle everything that you're good at. Then you look at the fight against Tagir Ulanbekov, and you probably held your breath waiting for the decision, because that was a really close fight. And then his last time out, he beat JP Baze at everything. Baze is a good wrestler. Bruno Silva beat him there. Bruno Silva beat him to the punch. He looked really good in that fight. For Victor Rodriguez, he throws everything into his shot, so maybe you like him to get a finish early, but I do like Bruno Silva here. You look at it at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram, 76% of the fans going with Silva to the 24% that have Rodriguez. For me, yeah, I've got Bruno Silva all day. And to head back up to the chat, we did have a super chat, and Tajik Bey, you are the GOAT of MMA betting, apparently. So kudos to you.
I thought it was Yanni the Greek, personally, but...
Yikes. Matt, our next fight, this is one that I've been stuck on all week. You know, you got Court McGee taking on Claudio Silva, and shouts to good guy Claudio. I mean, you look at it, this is a guy that's he trained in England for most of his MMA career. And he's really, really good at jiu-jitsu, and he's trained at ATT. And if you look at it over on Instagram, he's been in Brazil getting ready for this camp. And I thought, well, you're not working with some of the best fighters in the world. Oh, but he's fed like 600 families.
Making the world a better place.
Like, what a great guy we have here in Claudio Silva. He's taking on Court McGee that's like a zombie in the cage. He never goes away. He's always pumping that jab out there, closing distance. And you probably were yelling at your TV the last time Court McGee was out because he decided, I'm not going to wrestle against Carlos Condit, whose takedown defense is non-existent. They struck. Condit won. McGee didn't look great. And then the fight before, like the Sean Brady fight, he got out-wrestled, he got out-Court McGee.
It's going to happen against Sean Brady.
Much younger fighter. So in this one, I agree with Kiko CR. This is popping popcorn for me. I called it a garbage fight at the start of the week. We were split on the pick. Listen, Claudio made the weight. 169.5 and looked all right on the scale. I do like the fight. Court looked good too, credit where it's due. But yeah, I'm really eager to see what you got on this one.
This is kind of a Bellator fight in the UFC. Let's just call it what it is. You have a 38-year-old fighting a 37-year-old. Like, these are guys at the start of their, or really in the peak of their MMA careers, but I still think it'll be a fun fight. That's the thing. Like, I think there are places for veterans like these guys in the division. And for Claudio Silva, not really the same kind of veteran that Court McGee is, because I guess inactivity's really been the story throughout his career. And with Court McGee, yeah, the record's salty. 19-10 is not the best record to look at, but look at the names on the record. Like, he's fought Wonder Boy. He's fought Matt Brown. He's fought Robert Whittaker. Like, Court McGee's been in there.
And beat him.
And beat Robert Whittaker, too. So that just tells you, like, Court McGee's been around and done that. And you know what you're going to get out of a Court McGee fight. You're going to get, do we say okay volume? Slightly below average volume now. It's not what it used to be, let's just say that. But you know you are going to get forward pressure. I would say normally you get wrestling from Court McGee, but like you mentioned, against one of the fighters who stylistically can't defend takedowns at all, you thought Court McGee would wrestle a lot more in that fight. So for me, I just don't know athletically where Court McGee really is in his life anymore. Because to get those takedowns, you do need a certain level of athleticism behind your shots to really go out there and secure the takedowns. And if you're at a point in your career where you just kind of realize, like, hey, I don't really have the push-off that I used to, and I don't think I can secure those takedowns. Like, you're not Dirk Nowitzki in 2011, where you can just, like, okay, I can't do all my post moves, but I'll just get really good at two of them. Especially against a guy like Claudio Silva, who, yes, he's still sort of basic in his approach. Like, his striking's not bad, I wouldn't say. His wrestling's good, but his jiu-jitsu's where his bread gets buttered. It's just a really interesting fight, and I've flipped back and forth on this so many times, if I'm being honest, because I see there being two different ways this fight can go. In one world, Claudio Silva gets very tired going for a lot of takedown attempts, can't secure any of the takedown attempts, and Court McGee does just enough on the feet, I would say, every single round to win the rounds. Or Claudio Silva's going to take him down in 5 seconds and wrap him up like a pretzel, and I'm going to look like an idiot for saying that Court McGee was going to make this fight competitive in the first place. But I got to be honest, I'm kind of siding with the former. I think Court McGee can defend those takedowns and make this fight be a striking battle. And I'm not saying a 15-minute kickboxing fight between Claudio Silva and Court McGee is going to, steal the headlines the next day. But I think that's the fight we're going to get, and I have to pick Court McGee.
I've been going back on this one all week, and if you look at it for Court McGee, Sean Brady couldn't submit him. You look at it overall, or his overall body of work, and you talked about it. He's fought some of the best fighters out there. If you want to just take it in terms of like MMA math, I mean, yeah, Claudio Silva beat Leon Edwards, so he should be able to beat anybody. But if you do look at it for McGee, 9 wins by submission, 10 by decision, 3 by knockout. His losses, 1 by knockout, none by submission. He's never been submitted, and he's fought forever. And that's the thing. I mean, if this guy can at least keep the fight somewhat standing, I like Court McGee in this one, and I said it at the start of the week. When I was making the pick, I had a really hard time going back and forth on this one, so I will ever so slightly side with Court McGee. 39% of our fans at Fight Night picks have McGee, 61% have Silva. And to answer Trent's question up above, hey guys, need one upset pick of the night. Who y'all got? Let's have a look at the odds on this one, because I can't really remember where they were at. Court McGee. It's a pick'em fight, so it is really close. I'm going with McGee, but again, if you like Claudio Silva, you take him. That's fine. It's a tricky fight, though.
It's a pop and popcorn to me. I don't have this one anywhere near my card because, again, it's really hard to bet on two borderline 40-year-olds in the welterweight division. So, again, I'm going to side ever so slightly with McGee, but this fight could go so many different ways.
110%, Matt. We'll go on to our next one. Ben Rothwell. I switched the picture. He's taking on Chris Barnett. Now, Matt, Chris Barnett, he came in on short notice. I was excited about him because this is the type of guy that can breakdance after a win. He throws spin kicks. He'll throw like neat combinations that you don't often see at heavyweight. You'll see spinning back fists. And then the UFC puts out a promo pack on him. And it had nothing to do with his fighting skills and everything to do with his dance moves and his pre-fight stuff. He's the new Jean Vellante at heavyweight. It's like, this guy has a good personality. Forget about the fighting. And the trouble for Chris Barnett is, you look at the names that he was supposed to fight last year, and they're huge, right? Like, Bigfoot Silva was one of them. You go down through the line. He's supposed to fight Ollie Thompson. Thompson out, so he fought his coach, Ahmed Tijani, who was 0-0 at super heavyweight. He's supposed to fight Marcelo Golm, Jack May, and then Brett Martin for the title. And that was supposed to be, after this fight. But this one popped up. Over in the chat, Aiden's saying, I feel like Barnett could get a crazy knockout somehow. Maybe, but Ben Rothwell hasn't been knocked out since the Cain Velasquez fight, which was years and years and years ago. It was, 11, 12 years ago? Ben Rothwell in this one, I had him at the start of the week on my own card at a minus 250. He's dropped about 100 points since then. Chris Barnett's a fun fighter. Awesome to see that he made weight, and he looked pretty good on the scale too. But at 5'9", it's just tough to close that distance. Ben Rothwell keeps his head way back. Like, it's just a fight that's really tough for Chris Barnett. But if he gets the knockout, like you said, that would be like an ESPN-worthy type highlight.
Oh, without a doubt. This fight, and I hate to say this, but if Chris Barnett wins, the highlight's going to be all over Twitter, all over whatever Sports Center version of show you watch the next morning. Like, people are going to be talking about it. If Ben Rothwell wins, it's probably going to be because of, technical volume striking and some clinch work up against the cage. It's just, when Ben Rothwell wins, it might not be the most glamorous way, but he's at the stage at this point in his career where he just kind of knows how to win. And I always bring up Caitlin Chukagian when I talk about fighters who just know how to win. Now, Ben Rothwell's not going to just, follow his jab and walk backwards a lot, but he is a guy who, you look at his size, and yes, it's big Ben Rothwell. It's not like he's going out there getting a lot of knockout wins. He normally does strike his way into the clinch, and then he'll stall there a little bit. He might go for a takedown. He might clinch there. But when Ben Rothwell wins, he wins by putting out fires. And the best way I can describe Chris Barnett's style is he is basically just a fire in there, and you've got to put him out quick. And that's what Ben Rothwell's really good at doing. I just see Ben Rothwell moving forward constantly. Yeah, he's going to have to eat a few big shots to really close that distance and make this fight uncomfortable for Barnett. But I think that's what Ben Rothwell's great at doing. He has almost 50 professional fights, and I'm sure he's made pretty much every one of those guys uncomfortable. So I'm going to say Ben Rothwell. And I like him by decision, too.
Dave Baker hitting us up over in the Super Chat. Dave, I see you out there every single week with your record and your picks. It's much appreciated for supporting the channel, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. Matt, this fight at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram, 68% Rothwell to 32% Barnett. And the funny thing about this fight, too, it's just such an oddity where you had Rothwell, he's supposed to fight Lins. Then he's supposed to fight a PFL fighter who made 205 that's supposed to fight Jordan Young but got released, and then the UFC signed him. It's just such a weird set of circumstances for Rothwell. But yeah, I still do have him here. Although, if Barnett wins, it'd be amazing. And listen, that would be great.
And there's a ton of fun fights for Barnett to have after this one. Even if he gets completely outclassed, I don't care. You could put him in there with, going into
Chase
Castro.
Sherman. That's
Chase
the fight.
Sherman. There you go. That's a fun fight. There's a lot of fights at heavyweight for Barnett to have. So even if he loses this one, I'm sure he's still going to go on and have a very exciting UFC career.
All right, Matt, move on to our next fight. We've Jack Hermansson taking on Edmen Shahbazyan. And Matt, when I looked at this one originally, at the start of the week, and I made the video, I took Jack Hermansson. And last night, when I threw it together, he was about a minus 155 favorite. And we were really critical about the fact that Shahbazyan, great first round, second round, yikes, third round, yikes. Big yikes, in all caps. But Jack Hermansson did the media row interviews this week, and he said, yeah, well, I'm just getting over COVID. It really hit my team really hard. We've been in the States getting ready for this one. Didn't really get to train a whole lot. My cardio is usually my biggest weapon. But even if with diminished cardio, with COVID, I should be right around par with most guys in the division. I have such a hard time. Let's hit up the Super Chat quick. We have A. Wright saying Barnett looks like the type of guy who would drop a diss track. Hey, I mean, maybe he would. And hey, Matt, don't ever go against the Sugar Show again. Have a great fight night, boys. Bob Collins, we appreciate you.
Thank you, guys.
But yeah, I have a hard time. I mean, Gazbox saying my gut pick was Jack, but looking at his record, I don't know. Might pick Edmen. Kicks Good saying Jack Hermansson will win. I just have a hard time for Jack Hermansson to lay it out. Couldn't train a whole lot. Cardio's going to be an issue. Maybe it's just smoke and mirrors. It's just a weird fight.
We're going to talk about this fight for a minute. I hope everyone's okay with that, because there's so many different angles and so many different things that we could talk about. Because for Hermansson, listen, everything we said about Hermansson still holds true. I don't care how bad his COVID issue was. I'm sure it was bad, but the same positions he would have had success in, he will still have success in. If he gets one takedown, I'm telling you right now, if he gets one takedown on Edmen Shahbazyan, he'll probably finish him by the end of the round. I do think he has that kind of ground and pound. And it's really weird. I talked about this in our video. People knew Jack Hermansson before he was ranked as this dominant ground and pound fighter. Like, you don't want to go to the mat with this guy. He's some of the best ground and pound in the UFC. And then he became relevant, became a ranked fighter, and people stopped talking about how good his ground and pound is. Like, this is a guy who, when he gets you to the ground, he's so heavy on top. He knocked out Thales Leites with ground and pound on the mat. And yes, Thales Leites is old, and he's maybe not what he used to be, but still, to beat a guy like that, who's that good at jiu-jitsu, in a primary grappling fight, where Jack Hermansson popped the cartilage in his rib in between rounds, which is an extremely painful thing to experience. I just think Jack Hermansson, with COVID or without COVID, I still think everything we said in our original video still holds true, I guess, the point that I'm trying to make. The thing I do worry about is what does his cardio look like in that third round? Because the third round, to me, is where this fight comes down to. If Edmen can drop Jack Hermansson in the first round, I think he'll finish him, to be completely honest. And that's the weird thing with Hermansson. He's oddly hittable for how stiff he is, but the great thing about Hermansson is he can make you not throw back at him just by throwing a lot of volume at his opponent, and those shell up. If he's going into the fight knowing, hey, my cardio might be a little bit compromised, he might just fight in a completely different style, and that's the thing I'm concerned about if you're a backer of Jack Hermansson. Does he know going into this fight that, okay, my cardio's not going to be great. I know it isn't. We're just going to go for it in that first round, and then maybe he'll be the one who's tired in the second and the third, and not Shahbazyan.
And there's so many people over in the chat saying pop and popcorn. I like the Tiny Moss Beetles comment. Nah, the Joker isn't about smoke and mirrors. I'm uncertain about my picks too. Yeah, this is now a really tough one. Like at the start of the week, if there was no COVID issues whatsoever, I'm all on Jack Hermansson in this fight. But now I have a lot of question marks and a lot of doubts starting to creep in. And you hate to be like that, but you got to be honest with everybody when you're trying to pick one of these fights. So at Fight Night Picks on Instagram, 65% Hermansson, 35% going with Shahbazyan. Mo Lester saying Edmen is a quitter and has no cardio. Hey, Mo Lester, who were you cheering for in the main event the other week? Probably Michael Chandler. Come on, bud. But you look at this fight, like Jack Hermansson, did you gain any respect out of his striking the last time out, where he did get outstruck by Vettori, but he did show the heart of, I broke my orbital really early on, and I just kept persevering through it. Like, that was a crazy fight.
It was a crazy fight, but still, I'm sticking with Jack Hermansson. Every time I talk, I'm like, I'm probably going to pick Edmen Shahbazyan, but I'm not.
I had him at the start of the week.
And I'm going to stick with Jack Hermansson. Listen, this is the thing with Hermansson. Even if I'm worried about his cardio, I still think he only needs that one takedown. When it comes to Shahbazyan, even if he drops Jack Hermansson, you're going to have to jump into his guard. You're going to have to engage in the grappling at some point throughout this fight. And I don't think knocking out Brad Tavares in the first round is enough for me to say that guy's going to go and knock out Jack Hermansson. I think he could put the hands on him. I think he could drop him. But at the end of the day, I do think that Hermansson's going to get a takedown at some point throughout this fight. And if I think he's going to get one takedown, I'm going to have to say he's going to win the fight. So I do stick with Jack Hermansson.
I'm just going to keep with the pick from the start of the week. But again, I would not be surprised if Shahbazyan wins whatsoever. So if you've got him to win, cool beans. I mean, if you want to play the MMA math train, Shahbazyan beat Brad Tavares, finished him. Tavares looked great against Shoeface. Shoeface looked great against Tom Lawler, so we can have fun with this all day. But
how does this get back to Jack Hermansson?
Well, Jack Hermansson, does he beat everybody and then he's on top of the tree? Maybe enters the PFL tournament. But no, I do still have Hermansson in this one. But it is a really tricky fight. At the end of the day, if Shahbazyan wins, I wouldn't be surprised. Not on my card. That's all I have to say on this one, as we got a couple of different comments. Matt W., Edmen by decision. Matthias is saying, is Jack the underdog? No, he's actually the favorite. Matt, next fight, Ricardo Ramos taking on Bill Algeo. And Matt, Bill Algeo, the slight favorite in this one. Ramos, you look at it, been training at Team Alpha Male for quite some time. Cardio was always a little bit of a question mark. And when you think in your mind's eye and take out all of the analytical data out there, who's the more skilled fighter in the cage? I'd probably say Ramos.
I don't know about that. See, here's the thing with Ramos. I don't really know what he's good at, even though he's good at everything. Like, he is one of those weird fighters. Is he bad at striking? Not at all. Like, he's a pretty good striker on the feet. But I've seen him get outstruck. Is he good at grappling? Yeah, he's good at grappling. But I've seen him get out-grappled, too. At the end of the day, for me, and with Ramos, he's just a good, well-rounded mixed martial artist. I know he has a black belt, and he's a great Muay Thai fighter. But really, Ramos, at the end of the day, is just a really well-rounded fighter. And there's a lot to like in just a good, well-rounded fighter. I don't know what he does better than Bill Algeo, though. Like, even if you think he has better jiu-jitsu than Algeo, and even if you're right on that, I don't know how he gets Algeo to the mat. My issue in this fight is, if they're just going to be standing at range with each other and primarily at kicking range, I have no idea how Ricardo Ramos is going to beat Bill Algeo. I think Algeo has the kicks. I think he's got the boxing on the outside. I just think Algeo is a really hard matchup for Ramos, especially up at 145 pounds.
Ramos is one of those guys that throws the same thing a few times. Like, you saw it in the fight against Lerone Murphy where he kept throwing the kick to the leg, but it didn't work, and then distance was collapsed. You see him with the spinning back elbow, and it worked against Zahab. He did it once, bang, he did it twice, finished him. So there's a lot of things to like out of Ramos in this fight. If you have a look at the odds, like I said, they're fairly close, and I see it over in the comments section. There's a big size disadvantage for Ramos. There really is. Algeo open to minus 120, he's a minus 128. Ramos open to plus 100, he's a plus 109 at this point. And if we have a look at Fight Night Picks over on Instagram, it is close, 62% Algeo to 38% Ramos. This is another one, really, really tricky fight, but yeah, for me, I've got Bill Algeo as well. I like his game. Sometimes it's tricky with fighters, right? Because he took on a Ricardo, and now he's taking on a Ricardo. And against Ricardo, he surprised a lot of people. Now, he took a lot of damage near the end of it, and Lamas won the fight, but he definitely gained stock. In the fight against Spike Carlisle, withstood the first round, and then after that, really started to pour it on. So, Bill Algeo, I like all the parts of his game. I do like him in this fight. Again, another really tricky one. I think it's lined right. And if you can make a pick either way, it should be very, very interesting. Beavis and Butthead saying, love watching your videos, but I can't help feel you underrated Cub Swanson too much.
My bad. Remember that time before his last fight I said he was going to get absolutely destroyed, and guess what happened? His opponent threw one strike and he got finished? Listen, I love Cub Swanson. I loved the performances that he could put on. But at the end of the day, like, listen, I still really like Kyle Lowry, but, like, he's getting old. Players and fighters and athletes here, like, eventually are going to get old. That's just the case of Cub Swanson.
All right, Matt. Question over there. Voodoo saying, did I miss Yancy versus Damir? Yeah, everybody is. Every single person is, because the fight's not on the card anymore. Matt. Felicia Spencer taking on Norma Dumont. We had a little bit of tomfoolery at the weigh-ins, but both fighters successfully making weight. This is another one. It's going to go one of two different ways. And you like the Chinese kickboxing background, the Sonda from the lady herself, Norma Dumont, who Matt really put down in the original video. And for Felicia Spencer, good level of competition. You like it. The win over Pam Bam Sorensen over with Invicta. She got the tar beaten out of her, but so did Leslie Smith last night against Chris Cyborg. She got the tar beaten out of her against Amanda Nunes. Never quits. And then we look at this fight, and you've got Felicia Spence and Norma Dumont. So it's either going to be Norma Dumont completely outclassed her on the feet, or Felicia Spencer becomes a wet blanket like she did against Megan Anderson, or Zara Farron, who's, you know, like a fish out of water on the ground, and you like Spencer. But what are you saying?
I don't know how Norma Dumont wins this fight. This is my problem. Norma Dumont, it's not like she's a good enough striker where every time she hits you, she's gaining your respect every time she lands on you. Like, Felicia Spencer can go out there and take down Norma Dumont without any problem whatsoever. And listen, I'm not going to say lock or anything like that, because then we all know what happens if I use
Jacare's never going to get submitted.
But the difference is that Jacare was very old in his career. Jacare's had some losses. Felicia Spencer's never lost a fight she was going in the favorite as. She's never lost a fight that anyone thought she was going in there and... Wait, she's never gone into a fight that she was supposed to win and lost it. She's only ever lost to Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg. Two of the greatest women's fighters ever. Two of the greatest fighters ever. These are the only losses on her careers, guys. She's fighting a fighter who doesn't even belong in this weight class, because she doesn't belong in any weight class. And I just don't know how Norma Dumont gets it done. Like, Norma Dumont's a good striker, but she doesn't have the power to put you away with one strike. She doesn't have the overwhelming volume that is going to be constantly, like, putting together different combos. I don't know how Norma Dumont wins this fight. We can sit on the fence and say, oh, it's one way or the other. I don't know how Felicia Spencer doesn't just completely out-grapple Norma Dumont. She has the wrestling, she has the jiu-jitsu, and she's used to fighting much bigger fighters, too. And that's a really important thing about all this. Felicia Spencer is massive for this weight division, and she's so good at jiu-jitsu that the second she gets most of these women on the mat, she's just going to ground and pound you and look for that submission. I don't think this fight's going to be competitive.
Mark Detail having fun over in the comments section. It's funny because you're commenting and we're doing the video, but when I look at this one, it is a tricky fight for me and for a lot of people out there in the world, but apparently not for Matt. If we have a look at Fight Night Picks for the overall picks, 74% Spencer to 86% Dumont. I do see this one being closer than you do. Matty B agrees with me over in the comments section, but yeah, I look at this one. I'm going to go with Felicia Spencer. I think the grappling's really going to pay dividends. But if Norma Dumont's able to, you know, keep it on the feet, I think she has a great opportunity to win. So we'll move on from this one into Justin Tafa, Jared Vanderaa. Now, Matt, at the start of the week, we both had Vanderaa. The guy's head movement's bad. He gets hit a lot. Harry Hunsucker almost finished him in their fight. But if you look at it for Vanderaa, you like the parts of his game that he brings in. He's got a decent level of wrestling in his back pocket. He also has the jiu-jitsu. For Justin Tafa, he's kind of been the UFC's darling this week. He was on all the programs. He was on the Unfiltered podcast. They had a big article written about him. They've done a lot of promotion for Justin Tafa and not for Jared Vanderaa. And for Tafa, I listened to it where he talked about, all right, when did you start incorporating grappling? Well, it was after a bit. It was after my kickboxing career, my striking career kind of got going. And then I started to grapple, and it was like, oh, this is just like when I used to play rugby, you know, kind of holding guys down. It is, yeah, it is a little bit, sure, I guess. But I don't know how much you can put credence into that when you're starting to take on these guys that can work the takedowns. For Vanderaa, Spivak beat the brakes off him in their fight, and strikers have beaten him, so it is a really tricky one, and I'm eager to get your thoughts here.
Why is anyone promoting either one of these guys? Like, Justin Tafa is an exciting fighter, and I do think he's a fighter who, listen, you match Justin Tafa up with pretty much anybody at the heavyweight division, other than the elite of the elite, he'll have a fun fight with you, but there's a problem. Felipe Colares isn't this, like, monster striker by any means in the heavyweight division.
No, he's not, because he fights at, like,
not Carlos Felipe, sorry. Carlos Felipe is a good striker, but this is my problem. When Carlos Felipe's outboxing you, and when you are a background in boxing and kickboxing...
That was a split decision fight. It was really close, and a lot of people, the majority had Tafa winning that fight.
That's fine, but if you're a striker, and I see you get consistently outstruck by guys who normally get tired in the third round, but that's actually when they're getting stronger, I'm concerned, because this is my problem. When people bring up, like, oh, this guy's a boxer, you have to think about it more than just the first layer of it. Like, yes, Justin Tafa is a decent striker, but he's got terrible defense, and he gets hit a lot clean on the chin. And I know he has a good chin, don't get me wrong. Like, at the heavyweight division, being hittable is not, it's not something that I want my fighters known for. And it's not like Jared Vanderaa is going to go out there and really throw a lot of, like, Yair Rodriguez types of techniques, but he's a fighter who can overwhelm you with his pace and with his pressure. And, again, I'm not here saying that Jared Vanderaa is going to go out there and beat Marcin Tybura tomorrow, but he is a fighter who at least has more than one wrinkle to his game. If the jab's not working, if the pressure's not working, he can switch in the takedowns. My problem is, at the end of the day with Justin Tafa, what can he do to switch it up when game plan A isn't working? He doesn't really have the takedowns that he can go to. He's not a phenomenal grappler like you had mentioned. And if you ever go back and watch some of Justin Tafa's earlier fights, like, there's some of the more underwhelming regional fights of a guy who only had, 3 fights before he got signed to the UFC? Like, when guys only have 3 fights, you assume they're like a 9-time world kickboxing champion who has a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Like, you can kind of make exceptions for guys if they are, like, stellar in their own sport coming over to MMA. But for Justin Tafa to get held down by guys who had negative records and never really fought afterwards, it's just concerning to me. I know I had Tafa at the start of the week because I was a little bit concerned about Vandeera's hit ability, but I do think I'm going to have to switch my pick. I think at the end of the day, the fact that Jared Vanderaa, listen, if he is getting outstruck on the feet, he can go to the takedown. If he can't go to the takedown, he can at least try to switch things up during the fight if things aren't working for him. So I'm going to have to go Vanderaa.
You had Vanderaa at the start of the week.
Oh, I thought I had Tafa. Well, I'm happy I had Vanderaa. Because, yeah, Vanderaa, I just think he's going to overwhelm Tafa. I think Tafa can knock him out with a big shot if Vanderaa walks into it because he is hittable. But at the end of the day, am I going to pick a guy who I think has a chance to land that one big shot? We're going to pick the guy who I think is just the more skilled out of the two.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, Jared Vanderaa has some of the tools, but he gets hit so hard and so much. And listen, if Harry Hunsucker's really giving it to you, Justin Tafa can do that too. Like, I do have a hard time with this fight. So for me, it is a tricky one. Can Tafa get back up to his feet? We've seen him training at NTG for the longest time. Yeah, it is bad. I mean, Ethan's saying they're both terrible in bottom position, but wouldn't you probably trust the guy himself in Jared Vanderaa a little bit more when he's on the ground? So I'm going to go ever so slightly with Vanderaa, but again, like a lot of people have said, just throw it away, pop and popcorn, enjoy it.
Spivak's going to hold a lot of people down and hit them, okay? It just happens to everybody in the heavyweight division, but this is kind of a weird fight to be so far up the card. I'm kind of surprised they didn't end up putting the Rothwell Barnett fight a little bit higher up, but should be an interesting fight.
Yeah, that's it. Diego Casas has the idea. Matt, let's move on to our co-main event. And listen, 530 tuning in so far, only 122 likes. We would certainly appreciate the support from you if you toss up that like. It takes 2 seconds. Now, Matt, let's have a look at this one. We have Yan Xiaonan taking on Carlos Esparza, and I've heard a lot of people, the odds, just about everybody going with Carlos Esparza. There's a lot of hate for her. I'm sure we're going to see in the comments section. I saw it out there on Twitter, And it's silly because you look at Carla Esparza, and while we had her kind of adding little wrinkles to her game for the longest time, it's like she's gotten better at what she's good at. Throughout her time in the UFC with Team Oyama, you see her just moving forward, tossing that jab out there, taking people down. And the only people that are finishing her, well, are the best in the division. And we talked about it. You talked about it. Tatiana Suarez, greatest wrestler, greatest at everything that Carla does. Well, now she's up a weight class, so that means that Carla's the best at it, which is kind of crazy. And there were a few people out there in the comment section this week that said, Yan Xiaonan's never fought a wrestler before. I would argue she has. I mean, she fought Claudio Gadelha the last time out. She got taken down 2 out of 10 times, 2 out of 10 attempts. Angela Hill can work a takedown too. And for Yan Xiaonan, she's really good at everything. Her takedown, 75% of the time. Her takedown defense, 75%. Her volume is definitely there. You look at the wins, I mean, huge one over Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Like I said, the last time out there, big one. The other one, if you think Carla Esparza is a boring fighter, she does have that fight of the night from not that long ago, a couple of years ago. So I absolutely love this fight. I'm really interested to get the pick, but for me, it's the second leg of the question mark kicks parlay. I've got Yan Xiaonan here parlayed with a tricky one in Josh Culibao.
So there's a lot for me to unpack right there. So I guess I'll just start. Is this a title eliminator? Because it could be like Dana White for the longest time was like, hey,
Dern's supposed to be fighting Rodriguez, so this probably is.
Exactly. Like, it's nice that the strawweight division seems to be in motion again. Like, we have a lot of the top contenders fighting each other. It's just nice. When a division does seem to have, like, oh, everyone in the top 10 has fights on the horizon, it is kind of nice, because then you know, okay, the next 8 months, this division is going to look a lot more different. So, just thumbs up to the whole strawweight division in general, but as a fight, this is interesting. With Yan Xiaonan, she's on this weird, like, legend killer streak at the strawweight division. Now, yes, she does have Rose or Joanna or Weili if you want to consider her a strawweight legend, but, like, beating Karolina Kowalkiewicz, beating Claudia Gadelha, and then beating Carla Esparza after that, like, that would be as good of a 3-fight win streak as you can possibly get in this division. Like, that could hold up really against anybody's, especially when you say just how important all those fighters were for this division. And the great thing for Yan Xiaonan, too, is when you're beating fighters like Carla Esparza, like Claudia Gadelha, they have fans, they have notoriety, and when you're beating fighters like that, it's going to help you move up the ranks even faster. I'm going to push back on something, we're going to disagree on this, but it's fine. Carla Esparza is not an exciting fighter to watch. She's a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but good and exciting don't have to be correlated together. Like, not every MMA champion has been exciting just because they're a champ. Like, Ben Askren was very exciting, still a very good fighter because of it. This fight will be interesting, because for Carla Esparza, I think her pressure striking isn't that bad, and I do think if she does string together some strikes and then goes for the takedown, she can actually mix in and have a really interesting game plan for this fight. But the thing that I'm worried about is that with Carla, she's in one mode or the other. She's either in that striking mode or she's in the wrestling mode. When she mixes the two together, she can do great. But even go back to the Joanna fight. Like, it was just wrestling Carla, and then it would be just striking Carla. And I understand, we've said it. She's just become more Carla Esparza over time, if anything. It's just shored up a lot of those holes. But against the other elite, well-rounded MMA fighters, I'm always going to worry about Esparza, because at the end of the day, her striking just isn't that great to win rounds. My problem with Esparza, her wrestling could win rounds, her grappling could win rounds, but just she is on the space, in open space with her opponent on the feet. I just worry about her, so I do have Yan Xiaonan in this fight.
Yeah, I've got Yan Xiaonan in this one for sure. If you have a look over in the comments section, it seems like that's pretty much the consensus. There are a few stragglers, a few Carla Esparza fans, if you will. If you look at Fight Night picks for the total votes, 72% going with Yan Xiaonan to the 28% that have Carla Esparza in the co-main event. But like you said, I mean, this is a great opportunity for both women to really get an opportunity at the title, where it seems like Rodriguez is going to be taking on Dern. We'll see if that one really does pop off. Now, Matt, we move into our main event of the evening. Rob Font taking on Cody Garbrandt. If you're in love with this fight, you're probably going to take like an under. Let's throw it on over to the odds just to see what there is. Like, I would go fairly conservative on this one, because both guys could box each other's ears in. Over under 3.5 rounds, minus 200 on the under. Maybe you like that one. The true over under is minus 2.5 rounds. Minus 130 for the under to plus 100 or thereabouts for the over. But I absolutely love this fight. I mean, both guys, primary boxers. Neither one really throws a ton of leg kicks. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The fight that really impressed me the most out of Rob Font, that wasn't his last fight against Marlon Moraes, was probably the fight against Sergio Pettis. And we know how good Sergio's been in Bellator, and since even the Rob Font fight, but we saw it in that one where Font just had his way with everything. And yeah, Pettis was moving up from 25 to 35. It was a hard fight anyway. Font looked great. 6% of his strikes were kicks. He doesn't throw a lot, but neither does Cody Garbrandt. The thing that people like about Garbrandt, Matt, coming into this one, the connection with Mark Henry, Didn't have a ton of time to train with him like I saw for the Assunção fight. It was a little bit with Henry, a lot with Team Alpha Male again. For this one, it seems like a mixture of both. I do like that. 100% takedown defense. If he didn't get into trouble when he was a kid, he could have gone from high school to college as a wrestler.
Don't get me started.
You like to see it, but both guys, very, very good strikers. I love the fight.
It's a really, really fun fight in this bantamweight division, and it feels like bantamweight was kind of on ice for the longest time. Yeah, Dominic Cruz just didn't fight for the longest time. He's back now, but still, just a lot of the top fighters weren't fighting. So it is really nice that finally Garbrandt is, I guess, medically cleared to come back, which first of all is really nice. Here's the thing about Garbrandt and kicks. There was a narrative where it was like, Cody Garbrandt is going to get really good at kicking. He went to Thailand for a training camp before the second TJ fight, and they were like, Garbrandt's going to be throwing more kicks. And he threw like 2 more kicks in the first round, still gets clipped, and still gets knocked out. My problem with Cody Garbrandt is, I don't ever care how good his skills get when I know where his durability is set at. And listen, you can be a really good fighter and not be the most durable guy. Like Michael Chandler just fought for UFC title. A chin isn't always a representation of how good of a fighter that you are. Cody Garbrandt's at the point, though, where just when he gets hit clean, he does get wobbled. And I'm not saying he's like Andrei Arlovski, but if you hit him with a clean shot, he's not a fighter that I trust who can eat 5, 6, 7 straight right hands from Rob Font and still be there in the 3rd or 4th round. I can say the flip side, though. Garbrandt has the type of power where if he can get on the inside of that reach and of that jab of Rob Font, he's going to be able to flurry on him on the inside. And that's the thing about Garbrandt that I don't really think gets enough shine. He's really good at flurrying on the inside once he does close that distance. He's great. He's got some of the best hand speed really in the UFC. But once he gets on the inside, it's those fast hooks that have really deceiving power for a guy of his size. So that's why this fight's so impressive. You were going through some of the rounds and whatnot. For me, I just like Font inside the distance. I'm not going to try to predict which round because here's the thing. Both guys could get stopped round 1 through 5. And I understand this fight's really been billed as like, oh, someone's getting knocked out in the first 2 rounds. But I really do think this fight could be an absolutely wild 5-round affair.
Matt, it is a tricky fight for Rob Font. You look at it, yeah, and I can see it over in the comments section. Rob Font's never been knocked out. He's been submitted in the past. He's never been TKO'd. At the same time, he's been wobbled in fights too.
And Pedro Munoz wobbled him before he submitted him in that fight.
And we all know how, I don't know, how strong, how crisp Pedro Munoz is. And if you're a Cody Garbrandt fan and you want to make the argument, you can talk about Garbrandt. Well, he's only ever lost to cheaters. Now, for Munoz, it was in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, where he got caught for it. And for TJ, EPO is a real thing, and I still love him regardless. But in this fight, it is tricky. I pulled it up on a website that I used to use all the time in Fight Metric, and I don't really use it as much anymore because it is a little clunky. But if you look at it, the percentage of what these guys are doing in their fights, 46% of the time Rob Font's striking, 21% of the time he's going for a takedown, 31% of his overall attack submissions. Garbrandt, 66% striking, 33% takedowns. Absolutely screw off with those submissions. We don't need them. The numbers do support a win for Font. If you look at it, strikes absorbed per minute, a little bit more for Font than they are for Garbrandt. So Garbrandt with a little bit better defense at a 3% adage. If you look at it for striking accuracy, Font way out in front, about 5% there. But the number landed per minute, 5.21 for Font to 3.35 for Garbrandt. Both of those above the UFC average. So neat to see that. Better takedown defense, obviously, out of the man himself, Cody Garbrandt. But again, that's his bread and butter and his base. And I talked about it with Rob Font. Love to see this guy cornering fighters like Michael Chiesa, like Michael Johnson before him. Rob Font with the New England Cartel. They've got it going on, even with the fighters in the region.
And I was just going to say, that is a theme amongst that gym. Like, there is some gyms where it's like, hey, you're a veteran, like, you're going to corner some of our younger guys. It's a great thing to see, too. I know we talk about this a lot. Like, even Michael Johnson, who I know isn't at the forefront anymore, but, like, when MMA fighters are in other guys' corners in their spare time, like, it tells you that they're probably in training camp and they're probably in shape all year round because that's what they care about. They care about helping their teammates, and they're not just going to be in the gym when it's time for their training camp. Like, they're going to be in the gym to help out their friends because they have training camps, get ready for their fights. All those guys in New England Cartel are just always really well prepared. You always know they're going to be ready and in shape.
So I do have a tricky time with it, but like I said at the start of the week, I do like Garbrandt's speed on the inside. Rob Font definitely has that big reach advantage. He can normally use it to his advantage, and the last time out, he did it against a fighter that's normally quite good in the pocket in Marlon Moraes. But again, I do like Garbrandt in the spot. Could this be like an Alex Munoz Cowboy Cerrone? I could see it, and I look silly. But again, it's pop and popcorn for me. There's a lot of fights like that. I've only got the action on Culibao and who was it? Yan Xiaonan, and also on Big Ben Rothwell. And I got him earlier on in the week. But I do love the fight, and I can't wait for this.
This will be a phenomenal main event. Again, this is the most boxing MMA fight we've had since probably like Max Holloway fought Calvin Kattar, and that fight ended up being pretty good. So I could not be more excited for the main event tonight.
All right, Matt. So we got 572 tuning in for maybe not the biggest fight that we've ever seen or fight card. Not even 200 likes. You just got to toss it up there. We would certainly appreciate it. So let's move back to the start of the card. Damir Ismagulov taking on a really tricky fighter in Rafael Alves. And you look at this one, Ismagulov, complete package. Can he point fight? Can he do everything? Is he a Russian master of sport and hand-to-hand combat? Yeah, he is. And is he taking on a really dangerous fighter that expends a ton of energy? Yeah, he is. So for Alves, maybe he gets a finish quick and early, and that would be crazy to cap off or to start your UFC career. But I do like a good, complete fighter in the Kazakhstan fighter that is Damir Ismagulov.
I agree. The reason I like Damir Ismagulov, and the reason that it would be so wild if Alves won, is because Ismagulov is that kind of a fighter. Like, he's got the well-roundedness. I just think, at the end of the day, he's the much more complete fighter in this matchup. So, no, I agree. I've got Damir.
Jesus keeps saying hipsters. Is it hipster to do stuff like this? Is it, though? David Dvorak taking on Juan Camilo Renderos, coming out of Extreme Couture on 24 hours notice. Missed the weight. They fined him 20% of his purse. UFC! If you get enough money to give guys 75K bonuses, don't take 20% from a guy that takes a fight on a day's notice. Like, that's just silly. But this should be a great fight. These guys were trained before in the past at Extreme Couture. For Dvorak, it was getting ready for his fight with Espinoza. I see this one kind of going a little bit longer into it. Juan Camilo Renderos usually fights the fight that his opponent will fight, so that's kind of neat. Always the southpaw, really good guy, but yeah, I've got Dvorak here.
Yeah, I think David Dvorak should be able to go on and beat a lot of the ranked guys in this division, so no, I agree with the whole breakdown. I like David Dvorak.
Both of us going with Dvorak in this one. Matt, we move on to our next fight. Joshua Culibao taking on Shayilan. I love it. Shayilan, all of the regional tape that I was able to see, love it. What was he, 5-1 in 2020? First win of the year was against Alexei Oleinik. Not that Alexei Oleinik. The one loss to Rongju that we ended up seeing in the UFC. The guy definitely has potential. Josh Culibao, bit of an unknown still. Like, this is another prove it to me fight, but I had the confidence enough to go with him at about a minus 260 first leg of the question mark kicks parlay.
We're going to learn a lot about both these guys after this fight. And for Culibao, listen, you lost to Jalen Turner. It's going to happen up a weight class. And you have a really great fight with Errol Jourdain. I do think this will be his chance to get his first win in the UFC. I have Culibao.
Matty B saying fighters who don't make weight are failures who deserve nothing. Matty B, they're fighters in the UFC.
I'm in the middle.
Let's move into our next one. Bruno Silva taking on Victor Rodriguez. Absolutely love this fight. Bruno Silva, complete package, maybe down a step, but I think he does have, a decent career ahead of him in the UFC. The fight against Tagir Ulanbekov, very close. The fight after that, he finishes JP Bays. And for the guy, Victor Rodriguez, he was finishing some less than stellar competition in Alaska. And that's about the only nice thing I had to say. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Silva's a black belt. I think Silva's got this fight.
Yeah, I agree. Silva, again, when we talk about the more complete fighter, just a fighter who's going to have the ability to switch up where this fight takes place, you're going to have to look at Bruno Silva for that. I agree. I like Silva.
We're liking this one, Matt. We're both going with Bruno Silva. Our next one, Court McGee taking on Claudio Silva. It's a tricky one. I switched across the fence. I ended up going with Court McGee, but I have a tough time getting a read on this one. If you have a better read than me, kudos to you. Drop it over there in the chat, but I've got McGee ever so slightly.
Do I like this fight more than I probably should? Yes, I do. But no, I do think Court McGee should be able to get this one. I would be surprised if no matter who wins this fight, they retire afterwards, because I really doubt either guy's going to go on and try to make some, hashtag one last run like they're Alistair over him in the heavyweight division. But no, I do think Court McGee at the end of the day can just defend enough takedowns.
Both of us going with Court McGee in that one. It should be a great fight and an interesting one at that. Matt, Ben Rothwell's taking on Chris Barnett. Ben Rothwell can withstand the storm and make this one a pressure fight. I've got Ben Rothwell, huge size advantage. Maybe not in terms of weight, only 2.5 pounds. Rothwell at 265.5, Barnett 263. Love it. Love it.
When a fighter's chance to beat Ben Rothwell comes down to, can they knock him out? it's really hard to pick that fighter because with Ben Rothwell, and it's not just like, I'm not only saying this like, oh, he hasn't been knocked out in a long time. It's not like he's been fighting unranked heavyweights and just guys who you might sort of know. Like, Ben Rothwell's fought some of the most dangerous strikers in the heavyweight division, and most of them have not been able to knock him out. The only stoppage he ever received was because he couldn't get up off the ground from Cain Velasquez. So even that one, it wasn't even like it was a standing TKO by any means. I like Ben Rothwell.
Matt, both of us going with Ben Rothwell in that one. Your next fight, Jack Hermansson, Edmen Shahbazyan. I've got Hermansson, but again, the whole COVID thing here recently, that's a really tricky one. So, yeah, it's popping popcorn now.
It really just comes down to what do you want to do now that you're armed with the information that we are now armed with. Because if Jack Hermansson, again, if he gets one takedown, he is going to make Edmen Shahbazyan's life hell. He's so good on top. He's so heavy, and he has such good ground and pound that Shahbazyan's really going to struggle in that one position. But if Shahbazyan can defend those takedown attempts, if his cardio has gotten better to the point that I guess COVID would have brought Hermansson's cardio down to Shahbazyan, there is a path to victory. But no, I agree with you. Goodness. Hermansson, messed up all the words. I think at the end of the day, Hermansson will be able to get this win, probably by ground and pound. He will have to use his grappling, though.
Both of us going with Hermansson, but it is a tricky one. Ramos taking on Algeo. I've got the guy out of King of Prussia, Bill Algeo, in this fight.
I've got Algeo as well. This is a weird fight for Ramos to take up at 145, so maybe it could be a really fun fight, but I agree. I've got Algeo.
All right, Matt, we're both going with the man himself, Bill Algeo. Our next fight, we've got Felicia Spencer, Norma Dumont, going with the Canadian, but if Norma Dumont outstrikes Felicia Spencer, I'm not going to be surprised.
I will be so surprised. I'll wake up the next day and be like, oh my goodness, that happened. Because I just don't think she can. Again, we're dealing with a fighter whose only 2 pro losses have come to Amanda Nunes and Chris Cyborg. I just think it's going to take more than Norma Dumont to make a 3rd loss in her record.
All right, both of us going with Spencer. The next fight, Justin Tafa, Jared Vanderaa. Again, you can make a convincing argument for me any day. I do have a tricky time. Justin Tafa, good striker. Overcommits sometimes, but by and large, if he mixes in the kick and he mixes in the boxing, quite good. And you look at it, not a lot of head movement or defense from Jared Vanderaa. So again, you can really kind of talk about it in both ways or out of both sides of your mouth. I don't feel overly strongly about it. I've got Vanderaa, but if Tafa knocks him out, A, the UFC looks good because they promoted him all week, and B, again, you can just keep putting him on main cards.
No, you're 100% right. Listen, I just think Vanderaa has more skills in his back pocket if he really has to use them. Could he get caught by a big shot early on? Yes, he could. But this is the heavyweight division. That's kind of the risk every single fighter in the division takes. I like Vanderaa.
Right, Matt. We take a look at our co-main event. Yan Xiaonan taking on Carla Esparza. Yan Xiaonan, my second leg of the Fight Night Picks Kicks parlay. But it's a tricky fight.
The winner of this might fight Rose Namajunas next, which is kind of wild. Like, whoever would have thought that Carla Esparza versus Rose Namajunas #2 was ever going to happen after The Ultimate Fighter, but I do like Yan Xiaonan in this fight.
Up there in the comments section, if I go up a little bit, MMA Locker Room hanging out, and who we betting lunch money on, Craig? It's Yan Xiaonan and Josh Culibao. In our main event, Rob Font, we're split on it. Another really good one, another really close fight. I've got the speed and the in-and-out movement of Cody Garbrandt, but if he gets touched, who knows, and Rob Font can finish.
Exactly. I just think Rob Font's going to catch him on the way in. But again, if Garbrandt gets on the inside before he can get caught, he's going to have a lot of success, and that's why this main event's so fun. So I do have Font, but again, I can't fault you for picking Garbrandt.
Absolutely. Love the fights coming up this weekend. Can't wait for them next week. No UFC, so we'll have an episode of This Week in MMA, retool it a little bit, but really looking forward to that. Make sure you check out the rest of the stuff with the channel. Just dropped a great interview yesterday with one Youssef Zalal, who's got a big fight coming up against Sean Woodson. I can't wait for that. Check it out. JHK doing great work over there.
That's an important fight, too.
Toss a like on the video. We appreciate everybody that hit up the chat and the super chat. Matt, I can't wait for next week where we get to do something different.
Exactly. Listen, we love the UFC, but there's a lot of MMA out there, and there's a lot of MMA for us to talk about. So, yeah, switch it up next week, and then we'll get back to you guys on the next UFC event, which... Forgive me, I don't even know who headlines the next one. It's been a while since there's been an off week.
Rosenstrike, Augusto Sakai is your next UFC card coming up in a couple weeks. So, enjoy the fights, everybody. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.
Ladies and gentlemen, recorded in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, it's time for Fight Night Picks with your host, Craig
and Matt.